Lystra in the region of Lycaonia. After Paul healed a man lame from birth, the populace of Lystra imagined that Paul and Barnabas were incarnate gods. But, later, Jews from Iconium and Pisidian Antioch turned the crowds against Paul so that they stoned him and dragged his body outside the city, believing him to be dead. However, when surrounded by fellow Christians, Paul got up and entered Lystra. The next day he and Barnabas left for Derbe. After making numerous disciples there, they returned to Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch in Pisidia, strengthening and encouraging the brothers and appointing elders to serve in the congregations established in these places. Later, they preached in Perga and then sailed from the seaport of Italia for Syrian Antioch. Acts 13. 51. 14. 28. Circumcision issue. Certain men from Judea came to Antioch in about 49 CE claiming that non-Jews had to be circumcised in compliance with the Mosaic law in order to gain salvation. Paul and Barnabas disputed this. Yet Paul, though an apostle, did not take it upon himself to settle the matter on his own authority. Instead, accompanied by Barnabas, Titus, and others, he went to Jerusalem to set the issue before the apostles and elder men of the congregation there. The decision then made was that circumcision was not required for Gentile believers, but that they should keep free from idolatry, from eating and drinking of blood, and from sexual immorality. Besides providing a letter setting forth this decision, the brothers of the Jerusalem congregation sent Judas and Silas as their representatives to clarify the matter at Antioch. Also, in a discussion with Peter, Cephas, John, and the disciple James, it was agreed that Paul and Barnabas should continue preaching to uncircumcised Gentiles. Acts 15. 1-29. G2. 1-10. Sometime after this, Peter personally came to Syrian Antioch and associated with Gentile Christians. But, when certain Jews from Jerusalem arrived, he, evidently giving way to the fear of men, withdrew from the non-Jews, thereby acting contrary to the Spirit's direction that fleshly distinctions did not count with God. Even Barnabas was led astray. Noting this, Paul courageously censured Peter publicly, as his conduct was detrimental to the progress of Christianity. G2. 11-14. Second Missionary Journey. Map, Volume 2, p. 747. Later, Paul and Barnabas thought about visiting the brothers in the cities where they had preached during their first missionary journey. A dispute about whether to take along John Mark, in view of his having left them the first time, resulted in a split between Paul and Barnabas. Paul therefore chose Silas Silvanus and travelled through Syria and into Asia Minor c. 49-52 CE. Evidently at Lystra, Paul arranged for the young man Timothy to accompany him, and he also circumcised him. Acts 15. 36. 16. 3. Though circumcision was not a Christian requirement, had the half-Jew Timothy remained in an uncircumcised state, doubtless it would have prejudiced the Jews au textuae acute miritra longo. Paul 588. Trouble caused by Jews from Thessalonica obliged Paul to leave. Acts 16. 8. 17. 14. The brothers conducted the apostle to Athens. His preaching in the marketplace there led to his being taken to the Areopagus. His defense moved Dionysius, one of the judges of the court that convened there, and others to embrace Christianity. Acts 17. 15-34. Next Paul went to Corinth, taking up lodging with a Jewish couple, Aquila and Priscilla, and working with them for time as a tent maker. From Corinth, Paul apparently wrote his 2 letters to the Thessalonians. After teaching in Corinth for a year and a half and establishing a congregation, he was accused by the Jews before Gallio. But Gallio dismissed the case. Acts 18. 1-17. Later Paul sailed for Caesarea, first stopping at Ephesus and preaching there. From Caesarea the apostle went up and greeted the congregation, undoubtedly referring to the congregation at Jerusalem, and then went to Syrian Antioch. Acts 18. 18-22. Possibly earlier from Corinth, or perhaps now from Syrian Antioch, he wrote his letter to the Galatians. Third Missionary Journey. Map, Volume 2, p. 747. On his third missionary journey c. 5256 CE, Paul revisited Ephesus, and labored there for some 3 years. From Ephesus he wrote his first letter to the Corinthians and, it appears, dispatched Titus to assist the Christians there. Following a riot instigated against him by the silversmith Demetrius, Paul left Ephesus and headed for Macedonia. Receiving news from Corinth through Titus, Paul, in Macedonia, composed his second letter to the Corinthians. Before leaving Europe with a contribution from the brothers in Macedonia and Agai for the needy Christians in Jerusalem, and most probably when he was in Corinth, Paul wrote his letter to the Romans. Act 19. 1. 20. 4. Row 15. 25, 26. 2 Co 2. 12, 13. 7. 5-7. On his way to Jerusalem, Paul discoursed at Troas and raised the accidentally killed Eutychus to life. He also stopped at Miletus, where he met with the overseers of the Ephesus congregation, reviewed his own ministry in the district of Asia, and encouraged them to imitate his example. Act 20. 6-38. Arrest.